All right, everyone, welcome back to the Empowered Eczema podcast. We have a special guest today. We have Dr. Olivia Friedman. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to speak with you today.
Now, Olivia has a really beautiful way of going about helping people with eczema and actually has an eczema story herself. So, we're going to dive right in and have her introduce herself and her story of how she got to where she is today.
Yeah, sure. So I guess a lot of people kind of find themselves in a place later in life doing something as a result of earlier in life. And I was somebody who actually had pretty bad eczema all of my earlier life. It got worse and worse and worse as time went on. And as I got older and more stressed out from adulting and having a lot of responsibilities, it just continued to get worse. As we all know, stress does not help. At one point I was on 7 different kinds of medications trying to manage every single part of this, and it just continued to escalate. So not only did I have eczema, I had allergies, I had asthma, I had anaphylaxis at some point because I started having hives on a regular basis, and then they started, going to my throat. So I was in the hospital a lot, and it just got to the point where it was really just a ridiculously hard life to live because I never knew when the shoe was going to drop. As so many patients that I talk to are just in this up and down, roller coaster of a thing that, eczema brings. I finally decided to look at alternative medicines, and I saw a TCM provider who got me on acupuncture and herbal medicine. And he was really funny because the very first time he looked at me, he said, "Yeah, I think I can make this go away." And I thought to myself, wow, you're the first person who's ever said that in my lifetime. Everybody has always said, well, we're just going to have to manage it. And, we'll just give you all the different, medications and stuff to make you as comfortable as you can be. But he was the first person who sounded pretty confident that like he could make this go away. So I thought, all right, well, I have nothing to lose, right? And so sure enough, I saw him for about 6 to 8 months and everything cleared up. I mean, except for one allergy, asthma gone, all the other sensitivities to foods and, just things outside. All of the eczema went away, all the anaphylaxis, all the hives, everything. And I have never had to go back and do anything else, use any other medications, anything. So it was a pretty profound change. And I think anytime something like that happens to you and you basically get your life back, you think to yourself, why was I put on this earth and what can I do for other people that's, meaningful? And for me, getting my life back was like, gosh, if I could learn how to do this for other people, wouldn't that be the best way to spend my life on earth? So I quit my job. I went back to school. I became a acupuncturist, which allows you to learn to become an herbalist or a traditional Chinese medicine herbalist. And then got my license and started practicing, and here I am now. So
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing your story. And it sounds like so many people who are listening to this, I'm sure they relate 100% to the experience that you had. Now, compared to the way that I usually go about it from kind of like a holistic lens, I have never really dove into herbal medicines or acupuncture. Can you kind of share what that looks like, maybe from even your experience of what you went through in those 6 to 8 months, and then how you've learned and adapted to your clients? Because I know even now you help people going through topical steroid withdrawal as well.
yeah, it's interesting because now that I've been practicing, I wish that as people have conditions, they're given all the options up front and told, these are all the different paths you can take and which one sounds like you, or which one sounds the most aligned with the way that you think and the way that you want to go about, healing yourself. And unfortunately, what typically happens in the United States is, you go to a Western doctor until that doesn't work. And then if that doesn't work, that's when you actually start thinking about alternative medicine. So the interesting thing is, like, most people think, alternative medicine is something like voodoo magic or something like that until they get to that crux where they're like, wow, nothing is helping me. Maybe I should give this a try. So that's the thing that I wish we could change in the United States, at least. Other countries are a little bit more open to it, and we're getting better. But in terms of like what exactly is herbal medicine, this is a medicine that's been practiced for thousands of years. And the other part of it that I think is odd is that, Western medicine, pharmaceuticals and things like that have only been around for so long. And yet we put so much more weight into them than we do in these centuries, millennial, types of medicines that have been around forever. And if they really didn't work, they would be gone, right? They just would disappear because nobody would get anything out of it, and then they would go off to the wayside. But going back to school and learning about these medicines was a really interesting process because, you learned that all these different things were found like, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, and they have all these different things that show that they've been studying all of these skin conditions or other conditions as well, but I'm specifically talking about dermatology, and that they've been testing all these different herbs all along on how exactly they affect the body and how exactly they change it and how do they help the body go back to normal function again. And I think that's the biggest difference between Eastern and Western in terms of how they approach the body and healing. I think in Western medicine, oftentimes we do things where we focus on a mechanism, we try to figure out a way to shut it down. And then as long as you're taking that medicine, oftentimes you won't have that symptom anymore. But as soon as you stop that medicine, it comes right back because we haven't really fixed anything. We're just sort of masking it, right? In Eastern medicine, we think more about the idea of, well, why is this happening to you in the first place? And if we fix that, shouldn't all the symptomology that has anything to do with this go away? So we spend a lot more time thinking about the whole person. And I really love that idea. And this is something that the NIH is really pushing right now on this idea of whole person medicine and not just like all of us as bits and pieces, having to go to 500 different doctors to take care of the 5 different parts of our body. Eastern medicine really is about, we are one person, we are one body, and everything works together and everything impacts each other and influences each other. So if you don't look at the whole system, then you're really not going to solve the whole problem. So I would say those are the biggest differences between Eastern and Western medicine. And then, of course, how we actually go about figuring out how to put together an herbal formula is really different. Let's just use eczema as an example. The typical Western approach is, okay, we'll start you on steroids. If the steroids are not enough, maybe we'll give you immunosuppressants. If the immunosuppressants are enough, maybe we'll give you a biologic. The biologic's not good enough, then let's go to a JAK inhibitor. And everybody goes through that same exact course. And not only that, the dosages are pretty much the same as an adult, right? Maybe it's a little bit less for children, but those are really the only differences. In Eastern medicine, we say, well, wait a minute. Shouldn't we treat something that's on your face differently than something that's on your hand? And shouldn't we treat something that's on your upper body different than your lower body? And shouldn't we treat somebody who's like got really, really dry eczema different than somebody who has really oozy eczema? So how can we possibly be using the same medicines? So what we do is we look at the body in terms of many different continuums. So if you think about, let's just start with something easy. Let's start with itch. Obviously, that's a big component of eczema. We think about it as, where on the continuum are you with itch? Are you having a more superficial itch that's easy to satiate with a simple itch? Or do you have this bone deep itch that you can't even get to and you are ripping apart your skin in order to get to and you're still not feeling satiated? Or are you somewhere in between? Or, do you have skin lesions that are super red? Are they all over your body? Are they very diffuse all over your body? Or is it like these very specific spots that are happening? We look at, do you have, purulent exudate coming out? Where is that happening? We look at all these different things and we look at a continuum of where exactly are you falling in each of these different things. And then we figure out, what does this pattern look like? So for eczema, we have 7 different patterns and we're saying, okay, which one do you kind of fit into? And lots of times people sort of are in between a couple. So that's where the beauty of Eastern medicine comes in and herbal medicine comes in, because we can adjust for these kinds of differences and we can actually customize the prescription to match whatever it is that your condition is expressing itself as, instead of saying, okay, everybody with eczema gets the exact same thing. So those are the basic and more, I guess, the bigger differences between Eastern and Western medicine?
So my question is, okay, you've kind of been able to group them into 7 different ones, which I love, by the way. I think being able to see patterns, one, but realize not every person with eczema is the exact same because they're not, and everyone's very individualized. So, as far as what the herbal medicine looks like, is it okay for this amount of time you're taking this set of herbs? Is it usually like 2 herbs, 10 herbs? For someone who knows absolutely nothing about this, how does that kind of work?
Yeah, the number of herbs are really going to depend upon how many different issues that you have and what all the symptomology is. And it also depends like where in the phase of your condition you are too. You know, lots of times when people are in the middle of a flare, they have like a lot more acute symptoms, right? And if they're sort of in that, maintenance place where there's not a lot of activity, but they're still not, completely resolved, that's very different. So everything in between we also take into account. So the number of herbs will change depending on, all the different symptoms that are going on, all the different things that are happening. It'll also change throughout the entire process. So what I start you out on might be really different. Once we get rid of the acute symptoms, maybe we have to start thinking about, all right, now we've gotten rid of, a lot of the redness, a lot of the inflammation in general. Maybe you're able to be a little less sensitive to everything around you now. You can put clothes on, you can, do that. But maybe the itch is still bothering you at night and you're having a lot of trouble sleeping, right? So then we maybe focus on that. And then now that we can get you to sleep every single night, you're probably going to start healing a lot faster, right? Because that's when all the healing happens. So maybe after that point, and I'm going to skip along so I don't go through every single part of it, but let's just say we get to the point where you're no longer itching, you don't seem to have any real problems, but maybe there's some hyperpigmentation that's left behind from all the scratching that you've done in the past. So then we kind of work on that. So we can get rid of all the other herbs that were taking care of these other symptoms, but now we maybe work on something else. So I would say, very similarly to working on any kind of project, we don't want to do everything all at the same time. We want to kind of focus on the main thing at that moment that your condition is in. And then as that resolves, then we move on to the next thing. You don't want to multitask with the herbs too much. To some degree, they sort of work on your whole body, as we're saying again. But on the same note, if you're trying to do, 300 things, you're probably not going to do 299 of them well, right? So that's kind of the idea. So it's going to change. To get back to your original question, it's going to change. The number of herbs can be anywhere from, a few herbs to like 20 herbs, depending on, what they really need. And the other thing that's important to think about is that it's not just using an herb. It's like what dosage of that specific ingredient you're using. So you could have a prescription that actually has the same herbs in it, but I might change the ratios depending on what's going on with you. Mm-hmm. So sometimes some of my patients will compare their formulas to each other and they'll be like, hey, mine's exactly like hers. Why is that? And I'm like, hold on a minute. It is, but it's not, because the number of grams that each of these different ingredients are completely different. And that's why you're being treated differently. So.
And do these come in like capsules, or are they teas or tinctures, or do some of them fall into different categories?
Yeah, so it really depends. I work with all of them. Some practitioners only work with certain types, and it really depends on the practitioner and what they feel comfortable with. I really like using liquid herbs the most with my domestic patients, those who are in the United States. And the reason is because you take the herbs, you use distilled water, they put it into this pressurized cooker, and they basically get the extraction from these different herbs. And so there's nothing else that goes into it. It's completely pure. So I love those the most, only because there's nothing else that's been added to it. There's nothing that's, it's just the herbs. But I also have patients that are international, and sending a whole bunch of liquid to them can be really heavy, and it can get damaged, and then it can be a mess when it gets to them. So what I like to do for people that I have to ship things a little bit farther, I send them what we call granular herbs, and they basically look like a protein powder. You reconstitute it with hot water. It's a lot easier because it's just, in a little bottle or a bigger bottle. I also give those to my patients who are traveling so that, they don't have to lug around a bunch of liquid formula, which oftentimes comes in these little packets. They're like vacuum packets that look like, Capri Suns. They're about 4 ounces worth. I do have some patients that I give tablets from time to time. What I don't like about those is that they're not customizable. They're already made, so they're called patent herbs because they already have been set. So you can't change any of the ingredients and you can't change the dosages. So for some people it's okay, but for other people they really need a different, ratio. And so it's better that I can actually manipulate, what those dosages are. And then I also use topicals. So there's herbal topicals. So lots of times it's the concentrated liquid and it's mixed with emollients and different kinds of things that allow you to apply it to your skin directly. So those are the major types of herbs that I use. And depending on who you are, what your condition is, and where you actually live, will depend on what I'll probably prescribe for you.
Amazing. Another question that popped up while we're chatting is the idea of organ systems. So for me, when I think about things, I see certain symptoms present. And then for me, okay, I have a symptom that's surface level. Can I pull that back into an organ, or can I pull that back into one issue? For example, when my clients flare in the morning, I'm like, okay, that morning flare is usually linked to a histamine intolerance. Can we pull a histamine intolerance back even further to an organ? Okay, this is your gut and your liver. Is that similar to what you do, or is it symptom equals this set of herbs, or is it symptom to organ to herbs?
Okay, so it's all of the above. Again, I would say people have different reasons for having eczema. And it's really important to do that investigative work to see, how much of your system is affected, or how much your system is actually affecting your eczema, right? And then how much of the environment is affecting your eczema as well. So we're looking at all those different factors. And in some cases, yes, it is organ related. There's different systems that are not quite working as well as they could. Not that they're broken and not that they're, so out of whack that you're sick, but they're just not quite functioning as maximally as they should. And so sometimes we actually use herbs to help those systems be supported, or maybe there's a little bit of a deficiency and we want to bring it back to optimal functioning. In other cases, sometimes the system is actually impacted because of the eczema. So trying to think of an example, but none's coming to my mind at this
I
very
know, I
second.
want to hear an example.
I would say, sometimes the longer you have eczema, the more sensitivities to foods you have. And then, people typically start to eliminate things out of their diet. And then before you know it, you're eliminating so many different food groups that you're actually having orthorexia, which is you're not getting enough nutrients in general, right? And so now you're kind of breaking down other systems because you don't have those nutrients to continue rebuilding all the systems that you have. So that's a great example. I would say another thing is that, with nutrients, we're also bringing nutrients to the skin too. And if those nutrients don't circulate amongst the skin, then your skin cells can't rebuild as well. So, circulatory system is a big one. Digestive, we talked about. I also notice a lot of times, the longer people have eczema, sometimes they have a lot of digestive issues too. I think, what oftentimes we forget is that we think of skin as only on being on the outside of our body, but honestly, the inner lining of our mouth, the trachea, the esophagus, the lining of our stomach, that's all skin that's open to the outside world as well. And that's reacting as well when our skin is, acting up. So it's not unusual to see, asthma and digestive issues as being part of this condition, right? It totally makes sense. So that can happen. I can also sometimes see a lot of people who have bowel movement issues. They'll have constipation and things like that, or maybe even diarrhea. just malabsorption issues and things like that. And then sleep issues, and then, cognitive issues sometimes, right? With my TSW patients, I probably see a lot more of that than probably eczema patients. But there's this like depression, anxiety, fear, even restlessness, right? The inability to like just calm down. So, in Chinese medicine, we say all of these things are part of the actual condition, instead of what we oftentimes say in Western, the Western approach of things is that, you have this condition and now you're reacting to it. And now that's how you feel because of it. And in Chinese medicine, we're saying, no, you have this condition. This condition brings these types of emotions, and it's part of the package. And as we sort of like reduce all the issues in this package, then those emotions go away with it too.
Beautiful. I love that. I love this way of thinking, and I know my community is going to love this episode as well. If you had any advice for people listening, what is like your top piece of advice from your perspective of healing from eczema or TSW or anything like that?
That's a great question. I would say, and this comes up a lot, I would say go with your gut. I would say so many of my patients are looking to either their doctors, practitioners, or whoever to kind of affirm or confirm something that they already feel very strongly about. And if they usually know like what's right for them and what's not, there's just like this instinctive feel, right? And I feel like most patients will come to me and say, I don't think it's this, I think it's that. And, and I say, you know what? You're probably right, because you live with yourself every single day. You know yourself better than anybody. So I would say when you're looking for a practitioner, go with your gut. Go with somebody that makes you feel seen and heard, makes you feel like whatever you're aligned with is supported. In terms of making decisions about medicines, whether they be Eastern or Western, go with, again, your gut. I have a lot of patients who are on Western meds and they're doing great. I have patients who are also, going the Eastern route. I don't think there's anything wrong with either. I think we need to kind of find what makes sense for us. And, if you've already tried, the whole Western way and nothing's working for you, then be open to something else. And, if you are somebody who's like, oh no, I only want to do natural, I don't want to do anything else, but you've tried everything, I think you got to be open to that next step too, because you really want to have your life back and you want to do whatever you can to support yourself so that you can then do those things that you're meant to be on this earth for, right? So I think the biggest message I want to tell people is, like, with all different parts of your health, go with your gut, keep advocating for yourself whenever you talk to people, whether it's your doctors or, any other person who's helping you or supporting you, and, find the way that's right for you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And if you're listening and you'd like to contact Dr. Olivia, I'll have all of her information in the description below. And thank you so much for coming on.
You're so welcome. It was really a pleasure to meet you and to come on your show and to have a chance to talk with you. So thanks so much.
Of course. All right. Thank you and goodbye.